Welcome to the deep dive. Okay, today we're jumping straight into a piece of gear that, honestly, it perfectly shows how just a small, really targeted tweak can completely change a classic sound. We're zeroing in on the MXR M169 carbon copy Bright, the analog delay. So our goal today, right, is to figure out, well, how exactly they took that famous carbon copy warmth.
That really dark, iconic analog sound.
Exactly, and then re-engineered it to get all that clarity. And for you listening, this is really about understanding the difference, between a delay that sounds maybe great on its own and one that actually works in a crowded band mix, survives it even.
And that focus on clarity, that was absolutely the driving force right from the get-go. What's really fascinating, I think, is the internal nickname they had for this project.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they called it Project Prism.
Yeah.
The engineers literally said the sound was like shining light through the original carbon copy.
Huh. Project Prism.
It just perfectly sums up what they were trying to do, right?
Yeah.
Keep the analog heart, but filter out the muddiness.
That's a fantastic image. Okay, so let's step back a bit. The original M169 carbon copy, that landed in 2008.
That's right, 2008.
And it pretty much instantly defined that modern analog delay sound. People loved it for that deep, warm, kind of mid-heavy tone. Perfect for, like, a singing lead line.
Absolutely revered for that. But that warmth, that same characteristic, it was also its biggest drawback for a whole lot of players.
Right.
Yeah, the darkness, I mean, it's beautiful for atmospheric stuff, leads, but it could cause a real tonal roadblock. If you were playing, say, complex chords or fast arpeggios, the repeats just kind of blurred together. Became sonic soup, really.
Yeah, I can hear that.
And if you used it with heavy distortion or just in a live mix with loud cymbals and stage noise, forget it. The repeats just vanished.
So the Bright version, that was 2015.
2015, yeah. MXR released it specifically to solve this problem. They clearly saw that players loved the analog core, that BBD sound, but they needed more sparkle, more presence. They needed the repeats to actually, articulate what was being played.
And it wasn't like a boutique limited run thing either.
No, exactly. The context here is important. It launched under the standard MXR line, not the custom shop.
Yeah.
That really signals that they knew this wasn't just some niche desire, this clarity thing. It was something the general guitar-playing public, not just vintage nerds, was asking for. It needed broad appeal.
Okay, hang on, though. If they kept the core components the same, those classic analog chips,
the BBDs,
right? Isn't this just, I don't know, basically an EQ tweak? How is it still a genuine analog delay and not just the old carbon copy with, like, a treble booster added on?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And the answer is the core architecture is the same. It absolutely keeps that analog bucket brigade device line.
Okay.
Those famous chips like the MN3205 or similar ones. And if you haven't heard the term BBD before, just think of it like tiny little buckets passing your audio signal along.
Like a little conveyor belt for sound?
Sort of, yeah. And that process, that passing along, it naturally degrades the signal a tiny bit each time. That's what gives analog delay its characteristic warmth and that sort of decaying quality.
Gotcha.
And the modulation section, the part that gives it that nice, lush, tape-style wobble, that's identical to the original, too.
So the magic isn't the chip.
No. The brilliance isn't the chip itself. It's the, let's call it the environment they built around the chip. The absolutely crucial design change is that revoiced filtering network.
Filtering.
Yes, and it's strategically placed in the feedback loop. See, analog repeats degrade naturally anyway, right? But the filtering controls how they degrade, what frequencies get rolled off first.
Okay.
And the Bright's filter, it's simply way more permissive. It lets significantly more of that high-end frequency content pass through repeat after repeat.
Okay, give us the specifics here. How much more high-end are we actually talking about? Is it subtle?
Oh, it's a huge difference sonically. The standard carbon copy, it filtered the repeats pretty heavily. It started rolling off frequencies generally above, say, 1.8 to 2.2 kilohertz.
Right, which is why it sounds dark. Vintagey.
Exactly. But the Bright version, it pushes that high-end presence way up, often into the 3 to 4 kilohertz range.
Wow. Okay, 4K is quite high for an analog delay repeat.
It really is. And that higher ceiling, that's what allows the chime, the articulation, the clarity. It lets all that stuff pass through multiple repeats before they finally start to roll off naturally.
So extending that frequency ceiling up towards 4 kilohertz, I mean, that fundamentally changes the whole character of the repeats.
Completely.
But it still keeps the core analog stuff. The decay time is the same, 20 to 600 milliseconds. It's still true mechanical bypass.
All the foundational stuff is there.
Yeah, all wrapped up in that cool metallic seafoam green paint job. But that filtering shift, That's really the whole story behind the Bright name.
That's the essence of it. Okay, so the controls on the outside are dead simple. Delay time, mix level, region for repeats, and the mod button for the chorusy wobble. Standard stuff.
Right. So since the real magic is internal in that filtering, let's talk about where you'd actually use this. What kinds of sounds or musical situations really benefit from pushing those highs?
Yeah, this is where it gets practical. So if the original was always described as warm, dark, mid-heavy, perfect for those classic rock leads, the Bright is, well, it's clear, it's open, it's articulate. Players often describe the repeats as studio clean.
Studio clean. Okay.
Meaning they sound defined, very usable, not murky, which is exactly what you want for, say, bright, chimey, clean guitar tones, or if you're playing complex chords and want to hear each note in the repeats.
And why does that articulation matter so much in practice?
Well, what's key is how that clarity interacts with everything else, because the notes in the repeats stay distinct. They tend to sit on top of your dry signal and on top of the rest of the mix, rather than sinking behind it. So the delay actually defines the space more actively instead of just washing things out in the background.
Right, it's present.
Exactly. Even the modulation, that tape wobble effect, it comes across with a bit more of a pronounced, almost glassy shimmer because the highs are still there.
Let's drill down on applications then. Especially thinking about the player who's maybe struggling with their delay getting lost in a dense mix.
Okay.
If you're primarily using single coil guitars, Strats, Telsey, you're going to hear this benefit immediately. That extra presence helps your repeats just slice through.
Oh, totally.
Even if you stack the Bright with other modulation like a chorus or maybe a flanger to get those big ambient textures, the clarity keeps things from turning into mush.
It really does. And actually, here's a really important point for bass players.
Oh, interesting. Bass.
Yeah, because dark analog delay. It can traditionally just kill your low-end definition.
Okay.
It muddies up the punch when you use it on bass.
Right, makes sense.
But the Bright's design, because it's clearer up top, it means the repeats don't just pile up and overwhelm the fundamental low notes as much. It makes analog delay surprisingly usable for modern, clear bass lines, or even some synth-inspired bass effects.
Never thought about it for bass, but that clarity aspect makes sense.
And that overall articulation, that ability to cut through, that's really why this pedal became so prized in live settings. It just performs better than almost any other analog delay when you're up against a full band, loud cymbals, maybe a venue with tons of reverb.
It cuts, where the darker ones just kind of clutter things up.
Precisely. It cuts, the others clutter. Well said.
We saw some cool setting examples in the materials we looked at, too. Like you can dial in that tight, vintage rockabilly slapback.
Classic sound.
Yeah, setting the delay and region knobs low, maybe around 9 or 10 o'clock. But with the Bright, you get this crispness to the slap that sounds surprisingly modern.
It does. It's got a snap to it.
Or you can go the other way, crank the delay and region, hit that mod button, and get this huge ambient wash. Really lush, shimmering repeats. But again, with more definition than you might expect from analog.
Absolutely. And speaking of modulation, let's dive under the hood for a sec, because there are hidden features here. This pedal rewards tinkerers.
Oh, internal stuff.
Yeah, if you actually open up the enclosure carefully, of course you'll find two little internal trim pots.
Trim pots. Okay, what do they do?
They are specifically for fine-tuning the modulation effect.
So not for delay time or tone, just the wobble.
Exactly. And they're internal probably because they're not meant for constant tweaking on stage. It's more like a set it and forget it thing to customize the basic texture.
Yeah.
So the top trim pot adjusts the modulation rate, how fast the wall is, and the bottom one adjusts the depth, how intense or wide the wobble is.
Right.
Now, from the factory, they're usually set for a pretty moderate musical kind of shimmer. But if you adjust these, well, you can simulate anything from a really light, subtle tape warble all the way up to a deep, swirling chorus effect. You can actually push it right into that classic electroharmonics memory man kind of territory by cranking the depth and playing with the rate.
So it's like having a secret adjustable chorus built into your delay.
Pretty much. It gives you a way to really customize that analog wobble without needing a separate chorus pedal, if that's your main goal.
That's actually really useful. Okay, so zooming back out. If we place the carbon copy Bright in the bigger picture, the whole landscape of analog delays out there.
Yeah.
Where does it sit? How does it compare? It really carved out its own specific niche, I think, because it balances these two kind of opposing forces. analog warmth and clarity.
Right.
Think about a competitor like, say, the Boss DM2W Classic.
Total classic, but that's going to be warmer, generally thicker sounding, more focused on the mids. Or if you look at something like the EHX Deluxe Memory Boy, you get maybe more modulation depth options, but arguably less overall repeat clarity than the Bright. The Bright specifically delivers that defined, really usable analog tone, but without that typical sonic compromise of getting too dark or muddy. It's kind of the clarity champion of the analog delay world.
The clarity champion. I like that. And that leads us right into its legacy, doesn't it?
It really does.
Because by prioritizing that usability, that clarity, over just recreating absolute vintage darkness, the pedal earned this reputation almost immediately. People started calling it the most functional analog delay for live settings.
That's a serious claim, right? Considering all the iconic analog delays that came before it.
Yeah.
And that functionality, that practicality, it really shaped who started using it. It was massively embraced by players in genres where you need that pristine articulation. Think modern country, indie rock, contemporary pop, and especially worship music, where huge, clean headroom and clear repeats are just essential.
Yeah, clarity is king in those genres.
Exactly. They needed definition above all else, and the Bright delivered that without sounding sterile or digital.
Okay, so wrapping this up, what's the big takeaway here? What does the story of the carbon copy Bright really mean for us, for musicians thinking about gear?
Well, I think the significance is threefold, really. First, it proved that analog warmth and let's call it digital-like clarity, they aren't necessarily mutually exclusive. It kind of bridged that gap.
Okay, that's big.
Second, it definitely expanded MXR's own analog legacy, showing they could innovate with smart, modern EQ voicing, not just repeat the past. And third, maybe most importantly, it just offered broader usability. It gave musicians definition when they needed it without forcing them to go fully digital and maybe lose some of that analog character they liked.
So the genius wasn't some brand new chip.
No, not at all. The genius was in the targeted filtering, providing that crystal definition while still preserving the warm, essential soul of the analog BBD sound.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting that the M169 Bright was often seen as like a companion pedal.
That's a great point.
Something you might use alongside the original darker carbon copy, depending on the song, rather than seeing it as a straight-up replacement.
Exactly. Which brings up a really interesting final thought for you, the listener, to consider as you build your own sound, your own pedal board.
Okay, leave us with something to chew on.
Right. In this constant search for the perfect sound, does the greatest value maybe lie in having specialized targeted tools like the Bright, built specifically for clarity rather than always chasing that single mythical do-it-all box? Is specialization sometimes better than compromise?
The targeted tool versus the Swiss Army knife. That's definitely something to think about next time you're planning out your gear. A great place to leave it.